Okay, just checking here. Looks like everything's working. Let me check the values over here. Check the values over here. Good. So it looks like we have good connection over on Restream, and I'll go pull up my monitors on YouTube and on Twitch. Here we go. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Okay, good. Pull this value up here. Pull it up over on this device over here. Back in monitor. Excellent. All right. Make sure the volume's down for both. All right, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Today is August 5th, 2026. It is currently 8:30 in the morning, and we're ready to go ahead and get into this study session, okay? As the title card says, this is study in progress or study in session. And what are we studying? We are studying the tools that are necessary for acquiring academic prowess and for becoming a more rigorous thinker and someone who is more facile in dealing with ideas, the world of ideas. The world of ideas is no different, or I should say those who work in the realm of ideas are no different than if you were a tradesman or if you were a skilled laborer in any other domain. You have a certain set of tools that helps you with your work and that enables you to perform as proficiently and as correctly as possible. And that is the idea of becoming an expert. You become an expert in using your tools so that you are then able to perform your work most effectively. What are the tools of the academic world? There are many, many tools, as with any profession, especially the more specialized you become. You have to develop greater facility in a whole range of tools. But the world of academics can be narrowed down to essentially three basic tools, three primitive tools, if you will, from which everything else is built. And those three tools are knowledge acquisition, knowledge categorization, and finally, knowledge recall. Acquisition, or capture, categorization, or ordering, and finally, the ability to recall or reproduce what you have studied, okay? This means that every single one or all of your efforts in the academic realm are centered around these three tasks. These three tools, if you will, or sets of tools, are absolutely essential for gaining any sort of facility in the domain of ideas. If you do not have these three, you essentially are not an academic. You may be play acting, but you are not performing the work that you should be performing in order to do well in the domain. So once again, this is acquisition, categorization, and recall. Acquisition, categorization, and recall. From these, everything else follows. Okay, so now let's do a quick dive into what these three categories are, or what acquisition is. It sounds like a really fancy word. All it means is the ability to grasp something, to capture something. If you have the ability to use a pen and paper, you are engaged in the act of capturing. If you are listening to someone speak and you are considering what they are saying and you are trying to make note and hold it in your mind, you are engaged in the act of capture. Okay? If you then, once you have this information, you then try to understand it better, you try to place it in some sort of correct category with itself, you are engaged in the work of categorization. You're engaged in the work of ordering the information. If at this time, once you have captured the work and once you have ordered the work, you then want to engage in the process of recall, then that is where you take this information that you have and you try to reproduce it in a way that is most effective to an end. It is not the way that is the most accurate. You don't have to do a completely accurate word for word retelling of the information. You ideally you have performed some sort of transformative element to the information, and you present something which is valuable for people. Ultimately, that is your goal. As if you were a hunter, you go out into the wild and you find your prey. You do the work that a hunter has to do. You grab the animal, you then process the meat, and then you serve the meat to people. That is your role. And as an academic, you do the same thing. You go out into the realm of ideas, you capture an idea, you process the idea as you would a piece of meat, and you then serve the idea in a pleasing fashion so that people are sustained and so people have some sort of value adding. All right? So that is essentially what this work is about. And so my particular methodology, or my particular way of presenting these three strands, or working with these three strands, is in the acquisition category. I am engaged in the work of doing handwriting. I subscribe to the theory that the more parts of the brain that are engaged in the learning process, the more effectively you understand, not necessarily remember, but the more effectively you can understand concepts, because you're engaged in more mental activity. So that is why I tend to lean more in the direction of using the hand versus using something like the keyboard. Although, I mean, I love the fact that we have keyboards and that it can reduce the amount of effort that we put in to our work. But when we're engaged in understanding in the acquisition phase, we don't want to reduce the amount of work. We want to find the optimum amount of work, the optimum level of effort that you put out in order to elicit brain activity, but enough, but not so much that it actually becomes a hindrance. With that being said, in the area of handwriting, we have two ways that you can write. There is the main method that pretty much everybody knows, and that is the longhand. This is the way that you're taught in school. This follows the rules of orthography. It usually has a long history of use of some sort of script in your native language. For instance, English, you can trace it back through the Greek and through the Phoenician and so on and so forth. And that's the orthographic or the longhand version. There is another form in which language has been transcribed over the years, and that is using shorthand. And shorthand does not follow orthographic principles. It follows rules of phonetic principles. In other words, we're looking at the actual way that language has been spoken, and we then transcribe the written or the spoken elements of speech. This is what phonetics is. Phonetics is concerned with the spoken language. Okay? Once you have this spoken language transcribed, you have a set of symbols. You then further truncate, and you identify which words are the most frequently used words in the language, and you create a specialized subset of characters that are used exclusively for those frequently used words. And then on top of that, so already you have reduced the amount of labor involved in the transcription process because you are working in the realm of phonetics, but you then further truncate the process by making even shorter forms for the words that are in high usage words or high frequency words. And then the third level is you then have words which are frequently used. You then have phrases which are frequently used. These are groupings of words. You then further truncate. You create even more specialized symbols for these phrases. So these three elements, from phonetics, goes to truncation or the compression to the brief forms, the frequently used words. From the frequently used words, we then derive the frequently used phrases. Each of these elements is designed to make the capture of language, and thereby the capture of thought, as accessible and as easy to grasp as possible. Okay? And so back in the day, shorthand was used primarily for speed when we needed to transcribe someone's speech quickly, or when someone needed to take down a letter. They would speak the letter to a scribe or an amanuensis, and then that scribe would have quickly jotted down the information in shorthand, and then later they would have copied out the letter in longhand in the formal layout. In this modern era, we don't need to concern ourselves with speed. Speed is of no value to us anymore. We have the electronic means by which you can capture information far, far more effectively than you ever could with your hand. There is absolutely, if you are looking to use shorthand for its speed, give up. There's no reason why you should engage in that process. It's a total waste of time. However, there is one aspect of shorthand which is still very useful and very, very worthwhile in your endeavors, and that is that it reduces the amount of hand strain. If you have reduced the amount of strokes that are necessary in order to capture information, you have reduced the amount of effort that your hand has to put in to the process. Okay? Now, of course, as the phrase goes, there is no such thing as a free lunch. There is no such thing as a free lunch. And so you do have to put in effort, but you put in effort in essentially what I'm doing here in this stream. You put in the effort at the beginning by learning these forms, by learning a new language, essentially. Once you've learned this new language, though, you now reduce the amount of strain on your hand, which means you can then engage in more and more effort. More and more work can be done because you are being more efficient with your tool. Once again, the three tools of the academic world: acquisition, categorization, and recall. You want, in the same way, if you are professional in any domain, you want the set of tools that is the most efficient, that is going to reduce the most fatigue, that allows you to become the most facile in the realm. And as an academic, you're working with ideas, not just information. You're not just an information expert. You are an idea expert, which means you're engaging in thought, which means you're engaging in understanding and insight. That is your domain. That is the world in which you're supposed to operate. And with that being said, you then want to have a system like shorthand, okay? Like shorthand that enables you to engage in the capture of ideas. I am not saying that shorthand is for everybody. In fact, I would advocate that you, unless you feel the excessive need to engage with this, or you think that it would be useful for you, I would strongly advise that you not pursue it with your eyes. Don't pursue it blindly. It is not an easy process. It does not necessarily help you in the short term. It is a long, arduous process, much as if you were to learn sign language, American Sign Language, or if you were to learn Morse code. It is a complete system. It requires rigor. It requires strength. It requires diligence, but it will richly reward you if you put in the effort. Okay, and that is essentially what the stream is here to do, is to show such effort. It is to show the process of the acquisition of the skill. All right. Now, once that's said, that was a very long-winded introduction to why it's necessary to engage in the acquisition part of knowledge. The second aspect of knowledge training of ideas training is the ability to categorize information. And the method that I have chosen to categorize the information is according to the slip box method. This is the idea that every piece of information, if it is worth keeping on, or if it is worth grasping and holding on to, then you should be able to turn it into a form in your own words. You should be able to present it in your own language, in your own framework, in your own mental model. If you are able to convert or transform a piece of information into your own model, then you are able to, and also you are able to keep it in a a card, if you will. It should be able to be said in 2 to 3 sentences, okay? Or 1 to 2 sentences, really. You should be able to capture that card or capture that information, hold on to it, and store it as an atomic, unique piece of information. Once you have this piece of information, you are then supposed to set it up in some sort of network or framework where you then are able to link it to other pieces of information. You link this note to other pieces of information, okay? Once you've done this, you've created this network of notes, you've created this framework that allows you to move from information to information, from thought to thought to thought to thought, almost like Hansel and Gretel with the breadcrumb trail. You then have this ability to construct, to transform and create new pieces of information, new patterns of thought, new outlines, new modes of thinking, because all of your information is linked in this framework. And that essentially is the idea of the slipbox method. So once you've acquired your information using some sort of effective means of idea capture, you then categorize the information so that it is linked to itself, so that it is cross-linked and easily navigable by you and you alone. This is a unique process. This is your tooling. It does not have to make sense to everybody. It does not have to be something that everyone else could approve of. It is a system that works for you and you alone. This is the key. You have to learn how to use your tools. Your tools. That's how you become proficient. With that being said, you then go through the process. Once you have engaged in the process of acquisition and engaged in the process of categorization, you then engage in the act of recall. And these are the tools, the mental models, the visualization tools that help you to present information in any environment. This is the areas of whether you are in a high stress environment, or it's laid back, or you have to read the room. All these different facets are going to make it difficult to transmit the information that you have derived, the understanding you have developed. So you need some sort of mental model in place, or some sort of tooling in place that helps you overcome the stress of presentation. Now, during the course of this stream, as of right now, I'm not necessarily engaged in that aspect, in that part of the tooling, but I am engaged in the first two, so acquisition and categorization. Those two are important at this moment, and the book that I am using for the categorization part of the conversation is How to Take Smart Notes by Sonke Ahrens. How to Take Smart Notes by Sonke Ahrens. There's a link down below to the Amazon page where you can pick up a copy of this book if you are interested. And I am currently on page 116. As I said, since I am essentially working on two modalities at the same time, I am engaged in hand copying this book in shorthand, okay? I do not advocate that someone copy a book in shorthand. It is not necessary at all. In fact, as Sonke Ahrens has pointed out repeatedly, just a basic reading or just a basic copying of information is useless. It is absolutely useless, and I fully agree with him. The only reason why I am engaged in the process of copying the book is to practice my shorthand. And so at the same time that I am reading through the information, I'm also learning the system. All right, so with that, like I said, I'm currently on page 116. There are 150 pages left, so I'm about 40 pages from the end. I believe it's actually 158 or something like that. And so really close to finishing out the book. With that being said, we have just gone over the idea, a quote from Charlie Munger, who was the vice president or the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett's partner, his financial partner. And he's just been going over how it's necessary to have a wide range of mental models and tools, essentially what we're doing here. You want to have the best tools for any given environment and become so well attached to those ideas and those tools that you know exactly what sort of tool is necessary for a given environment. The tool suits the environment, not the other way around. You don't find the environment for a tool, you find the tool for the environment. All right, so here we go. This is Munger. Munger writes, and you will see that this is a very grueling process, very difficult. So feel free to leave at any time. This is purely for reference and archival purposes, really, and also giving me a chance to practice my presentation style. And also, I subscribe at the same time that I'm working on these skills. I also subscribe to the theory of Richard Feynman that that you really don't know a subject until you are able to teach it. So this process is such an endeavor. It is an application of the theory, and that is that if I truly understand the ideas of memory acquisition or of knowledge acquisition and of informational categorization, then I should be able to present it and to speak fluently to the topic. And so therefore this is an attempt, this is a practice session to work with the process of having to wrestle with the ideas and to try and put them into words as I'm copying them out. Okay? All right, so once again, we're on Munger. So Munger writes, Munger. Now, of course, Munger is not going to be in the dictionary because it's a proper noun, but we do Munger. Munger writes, colon. Well, the first rule is, and this is a quote, well, comma, the first rule is that you can't really know anything. That you can't really know anything if you just remember isolated facts. If you just remember isolated facts and try and bang them back and try and bang them back. Period. If the facts don't hang together, if the facts don't hang together, let me confirm. So one step that I do engage with in the when I'm presenting the writing of shorthand is I check and see if words are in the dictionary that I created, and I constantly update. If words are not in there, then I make note of them off to one side and add them later. Okay. This morning, for instance, I think I added about 20 new words that we had acquired from yesterday's stream. So if I go over here, I check hang, and hang is a word. Okay. So you see it has that slight downward tilt, and that downward tilt of an in stroke turns it into an ing. Slight downward stroke of an in turns it into an ing. So we have hang. So if the facts don't hang together on a lattice work, if the facts don't hang together on a lattice work, and then lattice work is lattice work. And let me check that one. There are some differences, and to be honest, even with all this work that I've done, yeah, it's lattice. So even with all this work that I've done with shorthand up to this point, there are some of the vowel rules that they seem slightly arbitrary, I'm not sure exactly what the theory is for why vowels will go on one side of the line and then other side. And so sometimes it is just a matter of you have to do something enough in order to become proficient at it. And so this is one such word, lattice work, where the LA, I mean, it should be the A going on the outside of the T, but for some reason, this particular form has it going on the inside of the stroke. Okay, so there's lattice work, and once we have lattice work, if the facts don't hang together on a lattice work of theory, you don't have them in a usable form. You don't, well, you don't have them. You don't have them in, and then usable, goes the other way. Is that a B that's different? Let me check that. Usable. Yes, so that's usable. Now what's interesting is usability. Usability, because the form that's here in the dictionary would ordinarily be for usability. A disjointed B would indicate usability. Do we have that in the dictionary? Go over there. Usability. USAB. Usability. Ooh. Boy, that is ugly as anything. So it looks like I did try to create usability, but that's an older form. Oh, I see what I was trying to do. Okay. Usability. Okay. That's actually kind of, I should pat myself on the back. That is kind of clever. So what I did is I took the word ability, which is just the A and the B stroke, and then I put U in front of it, using the U's as a prefix, okay? Gregg is all about, part of that when I mentioned at the beginning of the stream that Gregg is about phonetic transcription, compression, and phraseology. One thing that I failed to mention is that Gregg Shorthand is also highly focused on prefixes and suffixes. If you have a prefix, in other words, this is it's a part of speech that appears in multiple locations, you take that form and you apply it across the board. So in this instance, use would be such a prefix. So in the form, if we were to do usability, and I'm just going to make a note here on the paper so that I go back and add that to the dictionary later. Usability would be such an instance where we have use as the prefix and then ability becomes the word. Okay, so there's our little Gregg lesson for the morning. But for right now, all I need to do is usable, which is this form. Okay. You don't have them in a usable form. You don't have them in a usable and then form. You've got to have models in your head. You've got to, to have models in your head. Period. And you've got to array your experience. And you've got to array, and array is simply this value right here, array, and you've got to array, and by array he means to lay out in some sort of structured framework. You have to array your experiences. Your experiences. I know we've done experience so often, but I'd have to check it one more time. That's another thing that I've found is that even though it might seem slightly paranoid from time to time to be constantly checking the forms, in the long run, it's better to err on the side of checking more than not checking enough, because you will actually learn a form incorrectly. So it may feel like you're wasting time to look up forms. To be honest, this is true in any domain. If you're learning any language, if you're learning any framework, err on the side of checking a little bit more often, because then you don't learn bad habits. And also, so like for instance, that's why I've made the website so easy to navigate for lookup, because you don't want to spend too much time on the lookup, but you still do want to confirm. Okay? All right. So there we go. That was experiences. And you've got to array your experiences, both vicarious and direct. And by vicarious, he means through other people. So this is like the things you read. Both vicarious, and let's check vicarious. So I'm going to try what I think is the form. Vicaris is my guess. So we have vicaris. Let's go ahead and see if that is vicarious. So it is somewhat similar. It is necessary to include the A vowel to the lineup, so that we get the vicaris, and actually no need for a final S. So we go vicarious, okay? And part of that is because the emphasis is on the second part of the word vicarious, and so that's why you add it. Both vicarious and direct. Comma. Let me check. Direct is that direct? Yes, that's direct. Good. Both vicarious and direct, comma, on this lattice work of models. On this, and then lattice work again. Lattice work of models. Lattice work of models, period. You may have noticed students, and this is Munger still, you may have noticed students, you may, and let's move down to the next page, have noticed students who just try to remember. Who just try to remember and pound back what is remembered. And pound. This is interesting. I don't know if we need the diphthong or not, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go pound. That might be pond. Pound probably requires the diphthong. No, I take it back. Pound is just P-N, which is interesting because that's the same as pen. Pound. And pound back what is remembered. What is remembered, period. Well, they fail in school and life. Now that is all italicized, that's all underlined. Well, so those who just try to remember, he says, well, they fail in school and in life. And that's all underlined. One long underline, italicized. You've got to hang experience on a lattice work of models. You've got to hang experience on lattice work of models. A lattice work of models in your head. In your head. And that was Munger, 1994. So that's Munger, 1994. 1994. Okay. And that was that paragraph. So let's go ahead and read back on that. So remember that the purpose here is not only to write the shorthand, but it's also to be able to read it. You should be able to read everything you write. And so when you're finished with a paragraph, the best thing you can do is you go back to the beginning of the line and read through. You read through the page and determine if there were any mistakes made, or if you're able to capture the cogency of the thought. Okay? So we go back up here to the previous paragraph, and we're looking for, now I think I failed to drop a paragraph marker. That's the normal way that you are supposed to indicate at the beginning of a line, and you do that by dropping a little arrow here, and then you do the highlighter. I like to do a highlighter. It's not necessary, but that way you're able to see where the lines begin. Okay, it's just a little extra help. And then I'm going to grab my laser pointer and highlight, and this disappears after a while. So let us begin. Munger writes, well, the first rule is that you cannot really know anything if you just remember isolated facts and try and bang them back. If the facts don't hang together on a lattice work of theories, you don't have them in a usable form. You've got to have models in your head, and you've got to array your experiences, both vicarious and direct, on the lattice work of models. On the lattice work of models, you may have noticed on the lattice work of models, you may have noticed students who just try to remember and pound back what's remembered. Well, they fail in school and in life. You've got to hang experience on a lattice work of models in your head. And that's Munger, 1994. Well, if that's not clear, I don't know what is. Well, let me check that. Good. Okay. So now we'll go ahead and proceed. Here's our next paragraph. A truly wise person is not someone. So we drop another paragraph marker and go ahead and highlight it so that we can go back to that location. A truly wise person is not someone. So a truly, and then wise person is not someone who knows everything, but someone who is able to make sense of things, but someone who is able who is able to make sense of things, to make sense of things by drawing from an extended resource. By drawing from an extend, I think this is extended. Let's see if that's extend. By drawing from an extended, and we have to disjoint the T, drawing from an extended resource of interpretation schemes. Extended resource of interpretation schemes. Period. This stands in harsh contrast. This stands in harsh. Harsh is going to be curved back on itself, I believe. Let's check harsh. Yep, that's harsh. This stands in harsh, and then contrast is going to be KS, I believe. Yep, there's KS. In harsh contrast to the common but not so wise belief, to the common but not so wise belief, and belief is just BE. Confirm that. Yep, that's belief. Not so wise belief that we need to learn from experience. That we need to learn from experience. Period. It is much better to learn from the experience of others. It is much better to learn from the experience of others. Hyphen. Especially when this experience, especially, yes, when this experience is reflected on, is reflected. That's probably reflected. Let's go ahead and see if that is correct. No need for the EK at the end, so it's just RFL is reflected on and turned into versatile and turned into and versatile. We did this. This is verse. Is it versatile? Let's go ahead and check. Yes, versatile does not require the R though. It just curves down to the S. So we have versatile. Versatile into versatile, quote, mental models. Mental models. And close quote. That can be used in different situations. That can be used in different situations. Period. And that's the end of that paragraph. So now we zoom back up to the top and go ahead and read the paragraph. A truly wise person is not someone who knows everything, but someone who is able to make sense of things by um, drawing from an extended resource of interpretation schemes. This uh, this stands in harsh contrast to the common but not so wise belief that we need to learn from experience. It is much better to learn from the experience of others, especially when this experience is reflected on and turned into versatile mental models that can be used in different situations. Let me check used. Yeah, used does it shouldn't be connected or conjoined. It really should be kept separate on the line below. Used. Okay. All right, so that is that paragraph, and we move on. When we delegate the storage of knowledge to the slip box, here's a new paragraph. When we, and then delegate, delegate is it's DL, I believe. Let me check that. How to take smart notes. This is 12.1 through 5, and then this is page number 16. Zoom back up. When we delegate, I think it might just be D, L, and then G. Let's check and see if that's correct. Nope, delegate is just DEL. When we delegate the storage of knowledge to the slip box, when we delegate the storage and store, I believe that's storage, right? Yep, there is storage. When we delegate the storage of knowledge to the slip box, to the slip box, and at the same time, focus on the principles. Focus on the principles is is it just PR? I think it's just prins, right? We take a look at that. Yes, and so principles would just be prins. On the principles, behind an idea while we write, behind an idea while we write. Add and connect notes. Add and connect notes. When we look for patterns and think beyond, when we look for patterns and think beyond, and beyond is it B in D? See what that is. Nope, it's just BON. Think beyond the most obvious interpretation of a note, the most obvious interpretation of a note, comma, when we try to make sense of something, when we try to make sense of something, combine different ideas and develop lines of thought, combine different ideas and develop different and develop lines of thought, comma, we do exactly that. We do exactly that, colon. We build up a lattice work of mental models. We build up a lattice work of mental models instead of just remembering isolated facts. Instead of just remembering isolated facts. And try and bang 'em back, to quote Munger. And try and bang 'em back. Bang 'em back. All right. What was that? Okay. Good. So that takes care of bang 'em back. That is the end of this paragraph. Let's go ahead and we dropped a sentence marker. Let's drop a paragraph marker. Highlight. Good. Moving on. Let's go back up to the beginning of the page, or the beginning of the section, which is here, and we read back through. When we delegate the storage of knowledge to the slipbox, and at the same time focus on the principles behind an idea while we write, add, and connect notes, when we look for patterns and think beyond the most obvious interpretation of a note, when we try to make sense of something, combine different ideas, and develop lines of thought, we do exactly that. We build up a latticework of mental models instead of just remembering isolated facts, and try and bang 'em back. All right, next paragraph. The beauty of this approach, and then beauty, B-U-T, I wonder if it's just booty, but that would not sound nice, but we'll check. B-E-A-U-T-Y. It's B-T-E. Okay. The beauty of this approach is that we co-evolve with our slipbox. Is that we, and then and then evolve. And that is a hyphenated word, so we go co-evolve. So in other words, we grow. We grow at the same time that our slipbox grows. We co-evolve with our slipbox. Our slipboxes. We build the same connections in our heads. We build the same connections in our heads while we deliberately develop them, while we deliberately, and this is deliberately, while we deliberately move down the page a little, develop them in our slipboxes. Develop them in our slip boxes. Hyphen. And make it easier to remember. And make it easier to remember the facts as they now have. The facts as they now have a lattice work we can attach them to. Period. If we practice learning not as a pure accumulation, if we practice learning not as a pure accumulation of knowledge, not as a pure accumulation. Accumulation, so that's one word that I have not, I don't think I've seen. Well, wait, I did see it. Is it accumulation? Let's see if that's correct. We go accumulation, might be accumulation. Let's take a look. You do have to have the U, but that is essentially, that's accumulate and that's accumulative. So accumulation is like that. So we go accumulation. Accumulation, like so. We're going to go ahead and add that to the dictionary. All right. Okay. An accumulation of knowledge comma, but as an attempt to build up a lattice work, but as an attempt to build up a lattice work of theories and mental models to which information can stick, to which information can stick, comma, we enter a virtuous circle. We enter. Does enter require an E at the beginning? Oh, I take that back. Enter is a prefix. So enter goes over the top. Haven't seen that one in a little bit. We enter a virtuous cycle. And virtuous is virtuos. Oh wait, no, virtuous is does it curve back in on itself? I can't remember. Let me check virtuous. Yes, it does curve. The R curves on the back side. Virtuos. We enter a virtuous circle, and circle is normally it's a prefix, which would then be an S turning towards the line of writing, I think. But if it's by itself, then it has the full name, which is circ. I think it goes circle, right? Or is it just suckle? Let's see. It's S-K-S-K-L. S-E-K-L. A virtuous circle where learning facilitates learning. Lovely idea. Where learning facilitates and does it curve? Curves on the other side, so we go facilitates learning, like so. Learning facilitates learning. Check. I have to check facilitates one more time. Yep, good. Learning facilitates learning. And that's the end of that paragraph. So let me go ahead and go back through, and we start at the beauty. Go back to the previous line. We're looking for the line that says the beauty. The beauty of this approach is that we co-evolve with our slip boxes. We develop, we build the same. We build, so build is, that was DEV, so there's build. We build the same connections in our heads while we deliberately develop them in our slip boxes and make it easier to remember the facts as they now have lattice work we can attach them to. If we practice learning if we practice learning not as pure, and this is few, so we need to go pure. Is that pure, or does pure require a P and EU? It does. As a pure, go ahead and erase this. As a pure as a pure accumulation of knowledge, but as an attempt to build up a latticework of theories and mental models to which information can stick. We enter a virtuous circle of learning facilitates of learning where a virtuous circle where learning facilitates learning. All right, let me go ahead and drop a paragraph marker, and I will be right back. All right, so back at it. Let's go ahead and continue. So we just finished that paragraph talking about how the fact that you are going to grow at the same time as your repository of information, your slipbox, okay? Now we go into a quote by Helmut D. Sachs. Helmut D. Sachs. Okay, so here's our next paragraph. This is Helmut D. Sachs. Hel, and then Mut, and then D. So here we're just going to go ahead and make the capital D, and then just do 2 lines underneath to show that it's the letter D. Sachs, and Sachs is the name, so that's going just to be Sachs. Puts it like this. Colon. And then here's the quote, so this is all going to be one full line. It's a block quote, so it's quite long. Go ahead, zoom down on the page. By learning, retaining, and building on the retained basics, by learning, and then retaining, retain, RT. I think that's probably going to have the R, the A in there. So we go retaining. Let's see if that's retain. Oh, okay. No, he chose to go to not put emphasis on the second vowel, so it just goes into a consonantal slide or glide. To retain, retaining, and building on the retained basics. And then retained is simply R on the retained, like so. Basics, comma, we are creating a rich web of associated information. We are creating a rich web I need to check creating first. Yep, that's create. We are creating a rich web. Let's go ahead and check. I think web is one that I had to add. Is that correct? Nope, it's there. Good. And that is web. Of associated information. And then associated is associate, right? No, that's associate, so then associated. So we go associate, associated. Information. Period. The more we know, the more information, the more we know, the more information, or books, we have to connect new information. We have to connect new information to. The easier we can form long-term memories, long-term memories. And then there's a slight break in the quote. So we do a square bracket and then the elision. Learning becomes fun. Period. We have entered a virtuous circle of learning. We have entered a virtuous circle of learning, comma, and it seems as if our long-term memory capacity and it seems as if our long-term mental or memory capacity and speed are actually growing. Let me check capacity and speed, both of those. Oh, capacity requires the city ending. And then speed, let's see if that requires a curve inside or if it goes on the outside. Oh, no need for a vowel at all. Beautiful. You know what's one of the interesting things about this copywork phenomenon? Like I said, I would not recommend that someone do it all the time. It really is, in my estimation, it is a waste of time if your goal is to learn. However, there is one fascinating aspect to this process, and that is my ability to hold longer and longer phrases of information has grown. It's actually mind-boggling. I'm able to hold almost like half a sentence in my head and then copy it over. So, for what it's worth, that is an interesting phenomenon. That is a very interesting phenomenon. What's also funny is I noticed that it has repercussions in other areas where memory is needed. The other day, I was having to remember hymn numbers because I was practicing hymns, and I noticed that my ability to hold the numbers in my head, just hold them, not make any associations, just holding the notes in my head or holding the numbers in my head so that I could then copy them down. My brain was holding onto them no problem whatsoever. So, you know, memory training is transferable, and even something as banal as or as mundane as copywork, I think it actually does train the brain in some way, just probably not. It doesn't provide enough training to warrant the amount of copywork. So Nuance all over the place. Our long-term memory and capacity are actually growing. Are actually growing. Period. On the other hand, comma, if we fail to retain what we have learned, comma, for example, by not using effective strategies. So this is for example, by not using effective strategies, by not using, and then effective is effect. Isn't this the one where it's just effect and then the if? And that one was like effectivity. Well, let's see. Effective. No, it is the same idea, but the K and the V are joined together. So we go effective. There we go. It becomes by not using effective strategies and strategies. I think that's it, right? No. Oh, wait, strategy. This requires the... yes, this one I think requires strategy. So we go STR to G. Is that correct? Let's see. Yep, excellent. All right. Hey, nice. By not using effective strategies, it becomes increasingly difficult to learn information. So I'm going to zoom down the page. Oh, I need to add another page below this. Wait for it to save, and then we go ahead and add. This is page 17, so we go H, T, T, S, in 2.1 through 5. This is page 17. Nice. Back up we go. And strategies. It becomes increasingly difficult to learn strategies. It becomes increasingly, so increasingly difficult to learn information that builds on earlier learning. It becomes increasingly difficult to learn to learn information. Yeah, to learn. Come on, there we go. To learn information that builds on earlier learning, and earlier is that, no, that's not earlier. Earlier is it earlier? I think it's earlier, isn't it? If I go earlier, see if that's correct. Yep, earlier builds on earlier learning. Beautiful. Period. More and more knowledge gaps become apparent. More and more knowledge. I think that Does that curve on the... I think it does curve on the back. Gaps. More and more knowledge. Gap. Yep, gaps. Put a little bit more of a curve down at the base for the S. More and more knowledge gaps become apparent. Become apparent. Apparent is APR, APRNT. See if that's correct. Might require an ENT. Nope, that's it. Excellent. Apparent. More and more knowledge gaps become apparent. And that A needs to curve forward just, or the P needs to curve forward just a little bit more. There we go. Period. Since we can't really connect new information, since we can't really connect information, connect new information up here on the next column, connect new information to gaps comma, learning becomes an uphill battle. Learning becomes an uphill battle. And battle is B-A-T-L. I think it's that. Check. Nope, just BTL. That exhausts us and takes the fun out of learning. That exhausts. We go exhausts us, and a little bit more curve there. Exhausts. Let's see if that's correct. That exhausts us and takes the fun out of learning. Period. It seems as if we have reached the capacity limit. It seems that we have reached the capacity limit of our brain and memory. Of our brain and memory. Welcome to a vicious cycle. And welcome welcome. What is welcome? Elkom. There we go. So it's just well. Oh, makes sense. I should have seen that one. That is well come to, and then vicious. So this is vicious. To a vicious, check vicious. Yes, slight, a little bit more of an O hook in there. So we go vicious cycle. Oh, to a vicious circle. Interesting. He's doing circle as opposed to cycle. To a vicious circle, comma. Certainly you would much rather. Certainly, comma, you would much rather. You would much rather be in a virtuous learning circle, comma, so to remember what you have learned. So to remember what you have learned, comma, you need to build effective long-term memory structures. You need to build, you need to build effective long-term memory structures. Long-term memory structures. And that's the end of the quote. So it's hyphenated, so it's comma, hyphen, and that's Sachs 2013, page 26. So we go Sachs 2013. Page 26. And there we go. So that's the end of the paragraph. We go ahead and drop a marker. Go ahead and I will go ahead and read back over that paragraph. It's a fairly long section. Here we go. Helmut D. Sachs puts it like this. By learning, retaining, oh, that R is a little bit too long. By learning, retaining, and building on the retained basics, you are creating a rich web of associated information. The more we know, the more information, books, we have to connect new information to. The easier we can form long-term, and long-term is hyphenated, long-term memories. ... So that shows the elision. Learning becomes fun. Let me check fun. Fun might require the vowel. Nope, no need. But the N does need to be just a little bit smaller. So let's go ahead and fix that. Becomes fun. We have entered a virtuous circle of learning, and it seems as if our long-term memory capacity and speed are actually growing. On the other hand, if we fail, let's put a little bit more of a curve there because that almost looks like an M. If we fail to retain what we have learned, for example, by not using effective strategies, it becomes increasingly difficult to learn information as that builds on earlier learning. More and more knowledge capacity becomes is that capacity? More and more knowledge capacity more and more gaps, so that it should be slightly more and more gaps. There we go. Gaps become apparent since we cannot really connect new information to gaps. Learning becomes an uphill battle that exhausts us and takes the fun out of learning. It seems that we have reached the capacity limits of our brains, and memory of our brains and memory. Welcome to a vicious cycle. Certainly you would much rather be in a virtuous learning circle. So, to remember what we have learned, to remember what you have learned, you need to build effective long-term memory structures. And that one was Sachs, 2013, page 26. Okay, so let's move forward. His recommendations for learning read almost like instructions for the slip box. His recommendations for learning read almost like instructions for the slip box. Read almost like instructions for the slip box, like is it instructions for instructions? Let's see. Yes, that's correct. Read almost like instructions for the slip box, colon. Pay attention. Number one is pay attention to what you remember. Pay attention to what you remember. Step number two, properly encode the information you want to keep. So this would be proper. Is that properly? Let me check it properly. Properly, so it's PRPR, and then you add an E to the end. Properly encode the information you want to keep, and encode, that's encode. Let's see if that's encode. Encode is not in the system. How about code? Okay, so both forms need to be added. Code and encode both need to be added to the lineup. Code and encode. Okay. And those are really simple, but we'll add them. So properly encode the information you want to keep. The information you want to and keep has a slight rounded nose to it, almost like they call that a bull nose. If you were to do masonry, those are called bull nose tiles. They're rounded, they're not sharp. Bull nose, so keep, properly encode the information you want to keep. This includes thinking about suitable cues. So once again, this is Helmut Sachs's recommendations. Properly encode the information you want to keep. This includes thinking about suitable cues. This includes include. Let me check that. Oh, hey, I need to use that brief form more often. This is include. Include is the circle and then the line. So this includes thinking about, and then suitable is suit. Oh, this is going to be suitable. Let's see if that's correct. Yep, beautiful. Thinking about suitable cues. And that was the parenthesis. And then the last point is practice recall. So then step number 3 is practice recall. Okay, let me make sure that recall is in the dictionary as well. It is. Excellent, excellent. All right, and so those are the 3 steps from Helmut Sachs. So let's go ahead and look over them again. Grab our little highlighter here. Step number 1 is here. His recommendations for learning read almost like instructions for the slip box. Step number 1, pay attention to what you remember. Yeah, that's a U. Let's fix that. Looks a little bit like a Sue or something. There we go. Pay attention to what you remember. Step number 2, properly encode the information you want to keep. This includes thinking about suitable cues. And then the third point is practice, recall. That's almost the steps for mnemonics as well. So it's all very, everything is cohesive. All good information kind of links together. I bid 31, by the way, was the page number. Oh, it was the same source, IBID, but this one was page 31 for Helmut Sachs. I've seen that name before. All right, so now we're going to do, we learned something not. Here's our new paragraph. Let's go ahead and drop a paragraph marker down here to our highlighter. And we now continue. We learn something not when we connect it. We learn something not when we connect it to prior knowledge, this is prior knowledge, and try to understand it. Not only, I was sitting there trying to make sense of it. I lost it, not only when. So let's go ahead and do not only when. Not only when we connect it to prior knowledge and try to understand its broader implications, its broader implications, what term, what is this one? It's, we just did it yesterday. It's, no, it doesn't take the last A. That's right. We go implications. Let's check and see if that's correct. Implication. Yes. And it's a little bit more, well, I mean, that's good enough. Implication. Yeah. All right, implications. Elaboration is another word for that. So implications or elaboration. Elaboration. Next column. But also when we try to retrieve it. But also when we try to retrieve it retrieve it at different times. It at different times, that's spacing, and SPA spacing, in different contexts, that's variation. What is variation? Isn't it just variation? Let's check that. Variation. No. It does require the eation. That's right. I think we used this just last night. Variation. Okay. And then ideally, ideally with the help of chance. So we have ideally with the help of, and then chance. With the help of chance, and that was contextual interference. All these fancy words. Contextual. So we go contextual interference, and interference is another fun one. Inter, and then ference. Go ahead, check and see if that's correct. Interference. Interference. So it requires the E, the second E vowel, so we'll add that. Interference, like so. Interference, close parenthesis, and with a deliberate effort, and with a deliberate effort, and that was retrieval. So the deliberate effort is retrieval, and that's retrieval. All right, so that was that paragraph. Let's go ahead and read back over it. Going to our last symbol. There we go. Here we begin. Grab our marker. We learn something not only when we connect it to prior, and I need to check prior. I'm sure that's prior, but yes, to prior knowledge and try to understand it, try to understand its broader implications. That one would be elaboration. But also when we try to retrieve it at different times. This is spacing. In different contexts, that one would be variation. Ideally, with the help of chance, and that one would be contextual interference. And with deliberate effort, and with a deliberate effort, and that one would be retrieval. I need to check retrieval. Yep, that's retrieval. All right, excellent. So that was that paragraph. That also ends page 117, and now we can begin page 118, which is fun because we're actually, yeah, nice. This is the last paragraph of section 12.4 as well. Very nice, very nice. And then I've got about 20 minutes left, and then I can go get breakfast. I generally don't eat until around 11 or so, so this is usually works out nice. Okay, so the slip box not only provides us with the opportunity, here we go, the slip box not only provides us with the opportunity, and let's check provide. Beautiful. Not only provides us with the what was opportunity? Is it opportune and TN, right? Is that what it is? Opportunity? Let's see if that's opportunity. Oh, it's even easier. It's APR. Oh, and it's OPR. Provides us with the opportunity to learn in this proven way. Oh, undo. Opportunity to learn in this proven, PRV in. See if that's proven. Yep, in this proven way, comma, it forces us to do exactly, it forces us to do exactly what is recommended. What is recommended just by using it. Just by using it. We have to elaborate on what we read. We period. We have to elaborate on what we read. Just to be able to write it down. Just to be able to write it down and translate it into different contexts and translate it into different contexts, period. We retrieve information from the slipbox. We retrieve information from the slipbox whenever we try to connect new notes with old notes. Whenever we try to connect new... Oh, I have my itchy undo thumb again. To connect new notes with old notes. When we try to connect new notes with old notes, period. Just by doing this, comma, we mix up contexts. We mix. Let me make sure that that is mix. We mix up, zoom down the page a little bit. We mix up contexts, comma, shuffle notes, shuffle. Is that right? It goes sh, and then it curves. Is that correct? Shuffle. Yep. Shuffle notes and retrieve the information in irregular intervals. And retrieve information in irregular, and so that's irregular intervals. Oh, interesting. Have I done intervals before? Wow. Well, I need to check irregular first. Irregular, that's correct, and then intervals. Beautiful. Yep, that's intervals. Nice. Nice. Intervals. Period. And along the way, and along the way, comma, we further elaborate on the information. We further elaborate on the information, comma, which we always retrieve deliberately. Which we always retrieve deliberately. Period. All right, that's the end of that paragraph. So let's go ahead and read over that section again. Starting at our paragraph marker, which is here. Let us begin. We learn something. No, nope, I jumped too far. Oh, I forgot to mark it. Where is that? The slip box is what we're looking for. And there it is. Okay, so let's go ahead and drop a paragraph marker and highlight it. There we go. The slip box not only provides us with the opportunity to learn in this proven way, it forces us to do exactly what is recommended just by using it. That is the slip box. We have to elaborate on what we read just to be able to write it down and translate it into different contexts. And that's the idea of putting it in your own words. We retrieve information from the slip box whenever we try to connect new notes with old notes. Just by doing this, we mix up contexts. What word is that? That is shuffle. Oh, really? Hold on, I gotta check shuffle. Yep, that's shuffle. No, okay, what's interesting is that this one, this shuffle, or this form, requires a sharp turn after the F. So we go shuffle. There we are. Shuffle. And now we highlight, shuffle, notes, and retrieve information in irregular intervals. And along the way, we further, hold on, further, is that just FTH? We further elaborate on the information, which we always retrieve deliberately. Beautiful. So once again, it's in the best learning practice to use the slip box. Beautiful. Now we move on to 12.5. Use the slip box as a creativity machine. 12.5. Use the slip box as a creativity machine. Let's add another page, and this should be the last page we need, because we just have 12.5, which is it's about 3 pages long, so we might end up getting close to maybe the 19 pages total. So we'll add this. How to take smart notes. 12. point 1 through 5, and this is page number 18. Very good. Let's jump back up here. And here we go. Use the slit box as a creativity machine. As creativity. Isn't this the one where we curve it? We curve it this way. Creativity. And I have to check creativity. Creativity is simply adding a TE to this value, so that is correct as far as the form. We go creativity machine. And machine is just machine, like that. Okay, and here's our new paragraph marker, which we'll go ahead and highlight at this moment. And we start off with a quote from Steve Jobs. Woo, Steve Jobs, yay. Creativity is just connecting things. Quote, come on now. Creativity is just connecting things. When you ask creative people, when you ask creative people how they did something, how they did something, comma, they feel a little guilty. They feel a little, and is little, does it require an L, or is it just a... Yes, it's just L-I-T. They feel a little guilty. Now, guilty, guilty is... Does it curve back? It goes... guilty. G-L-T-E, maybe? Guilty? Let's check that out. No, guilt does require an E between, so it's an E vowel in between the two, so we go guilty, like so, because they didn't really do it, because they didn't really do it, comma, they just saw something. They just, and that should be saw. Oh, what is saw? Is saw the same as so? Saw say so? Saw. Yeah. They just saw something. Which is, isn't that funny? So that's the quote from Steve Jobs. And you remember how, was it yesterday? Yes, it was yesterday, where Sonke Ahrens was, in a way, poo-pooing the idea that vision, what was it, that things that are easier to visualize are things that people move towards. Do you remember that? Where he said, even though plans are not necessarily the best, or like even though some plans are better, but they're not as easy to visualize, so people don't choose them. And he was almost saying like that's kind of a bad thing. it's so interesting. You look at Steve Jobs' quote, he's saying that creative people, we love creative people, and we wonder how they come up with the things that they do. And the reality is they just saw something. In other words, there's a vision. You're just connecting things. So I don't know, that seems like a little bit of a juxtaposition. I mean, that, to be honest, that would be an example of where you would make a note. You would make a note of the quote here from Steve Jobs, and you would say, your idea that you'd put in the slip box would be the ability for someone to grasp vision first or vision foremost ideas is a sign of creativity. Something like that. And then you could then link that back to the idea that was just said about how people tend to focus and enjoy projects that are more easy to visualize. So you can see already, just in this little bit that we've spent with the book, with this one book, we've already created, in a way, it would be like the first elements that you would add to your slip box. It creates the first interesting connection, which you would then be able to ponder. And I mean, that right there is the topic of a whole book right there. You just build out more and more references. Anyway, so let's go back to work. Just saw something, and that was Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, and this is Jobs. Okay. So now we have our next paragraph. About 4 minutes left. Let's go ahead and jump back, read through. Here's the quote. So it's creativity. Creativity is just connecting things. When you ask creative people how they did something, they feel a little guilty because they don't really do it. They just saw something. And that was Steve Jobs. Go ahead and put the highlighter on this, and let's continue. Many exciting stories from scientific history. Many, and then exciting is EX. Exciting stories, ST stories. I need to check exciting. Yep, there's exciting. Many exciting stories from scientific history make us believe that great insight comes in a flash. Make us believe that insight comes in a flash. Makes us believe that great insight, so we need to put great here. Oh, let's go ahead and fix it now. That great insight comes in a flash. There is the sudden insight of Watson and Crick. There is the sudden insight of, and then the name Watson, so that's Watson. Oh, it curves around. Here we go, Watson and Crick, K-R. That DNA would have to form that DNA, that Watson and Crick, that, and then we'll do DNA, so D in A, would have to have the form of a double helix, would have to have the form of, and then double. Need to check double. Oh, there's our timer. So let me go ahead and finish the sentence. Oh, oh, nice. That's actually the end of the paragraph too. So I need to go double, and it's just double. Yep, double. It's so funny if you try and say Gregg shorthand the way it's actually written, it just gets, it's dub. There we go. Would have to have the form of a double and then helix. And helix is helix. Let's see if that's in the dictionary. Yes, helix is in there, and it curves out. Okay. Almost done. Helix, comma, or the story of Frederick August Kekule, or the story of Friedrich, Friedrich, move this down here, Friedrich August, so that's August Kekule, so that was Kekule, who allegedly dreamed, quote, who, and then alleged, this is going to be a alleged E. Let's see if that's allegedly. Alleged. How do you spell alleged? There we go. G-E. It's not there? Allegation, allegiance. Oh, that's interesting. So we have to do alleged. Allegation, allegiance. So we will do alleged. So we go allege. Here we go, alleged, and then we'll add this to the dictionary. Allegedly, J-E-D. Is that a curve? Urged, charged, damaged, emerged, ringed. Yes. So this one we do want to allege. Allege is just by itself, and then alleged would be the we would add that to the form. So we go allege. Allege is this one, allege. And then if we do alleged, and then if we do allegedly. So those are the three forms that we need to add to the dictionary. Oi. Pencil? Allege, alleged, and allegedly. All right, beautiful. Moving on. So that would be allegedly. Allegedly. Oh, wait. Allegedly would have the circle. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, we can use that. Good. Allegedly dreamed of a snake biting its own tail. He allegedly dreamed of a snake biting. Is that bite? Does it curve back in on itself? Yes, it does. Biting its own tail. And the correct term for that is actually the Ouroboros. The Ouroboros, which is a very famous old symbol, who allegedly dreamed of a snake biting its own tail, and suddenly saw the structure of benzene and suddenly saw the structure of benzene. And benzene is, I don't think that's in the dictionary. Let's see. Oh, hey, I'm wrong. I am wrong. There's benzene. It's a very famous chemical structure. It's a way that carbon rings form. Benzene in front of his eyes. In front of his eyes. And eyes is this, I believe. Let's check that. Yes, that's eyes. Good. Yeah, so it's really interesting that so that last story with I think his name is Kekule. Kekule, when it says that he allegedly dreamed of a snake biting its own tail, if I remember the story correctly, he had a vision. I think he was driving or something, and he saw the snake biting its own tail. But it's not, as I said before, it's not just the snake biting its own tail. It is the Ouroboros, which is, if you look at it, it's an ancient symbol depicting a serpent or dragon consuming its own tail. So it has a very, as I said, it's a very long history. Like here, as you see, this is from 1478, and it's drawing from an alchemical. So it actually has an alchemy history, which, interestingly enough, and once again, he's not pointing it out here, but the fact that Calcule is dealing with, yeah, so here the woman's holding an Ouroboros. The fact that chemistry is so closely aligned with alchemy, this symbol here of the Ouroboros is so ingrained in the visual culture of alchemy, of the history of chemistry, and the like, that it's no small wonder that he would consider it as the idea. You know, it has a rich symbolic history behind it. So once again, I so appreciate Sonke Ahrens and his view on information and his understanding, but every once in a while I can tell that he's not really, he doesn't really step out of his lane too much, and some theories that he has, they do have a much richer symbolic methodology, and there are other ways of viewing it, and it's just a case of, I think, where you can become a little bit hyperfixated on on your particular discipline. But that's just me. Now let's go ahead and so that's the symbol right there for the Ouroboros, and as you see, Calcule, and just so we put it in context, this is August Calcule. He was a German organic chemist. Look at that. There's a face for you. Oh, I gotta love that. Look at that. That is a face that's got knowledge written all over it. Huh. Anyway, so that was his structure of benzene, and benzene are structures of, it's actually sugar. Sugar is a benzene ring. All of your fructose, glucose, the likes, they're all benzene rings, and that was the work done by Kekule. So let's go ahead and read this paragraph, and then I get to have my breakfast. So here's our line. Let's begin. Grab our little marker here. Many exciting stories from scientific history make us believe that great insight comes in a flash. A flash. There is the sudden insight of Watson and Crick that DNA would have to have the form of a double helix, or the story of Friedrich August Kekule, who allegedly dreamed of a snake, was that? Biting its own tail, and suddenly saw the structure. Pardon me. Sorry, I don't know if that came through on stream or not. I just had a sneeze. A structure of benzene in front of his eyes. All right, so there we go. Once again, he is going to talk about the flash and all that sort of stuff, and that is true. It comes at a flash, but usually it's a flash after you've built so much of the structure. So you've done so much work, and then all of a sudden something happens. So anyway, I think that's what he's going to talk about later. All right, well, thank you so much for joining in. If anyone ever sees these, it's going to be funny. Maybe one day I will do a master compilation where I take every single one of these videos I've done and do a ×4 speed or a ×8 speed, and then you can just see boom, 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 page after page written out. But in the meantime, thanks to anyone if anyone ever sees this, hey, I appreciate you. I really do. And so yeah, that was 3 hours of study. We essentially got, I was able to get 2 pages done, 2.5 pages essentially of copywork done today. I had started out, I had added a whole bunch of words this morning, and so that cut into the time. But yeah, it's 11 o'clock now, so I'm gonna go get my breakfast, and I'll be back in probably around 40 minutes to an hour to do the next set. Today I'll only be able to do 6 hours because I have some orientation stuff to do for my upcoming coursework at college or university. And so yeah, with that, thank you everyone, and I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. So, adios.